Well, the keel, the initial keel is down and dried, and we're going to be putting another layer over the top of that. But before we do that, I like to build the skeg up first, because what's going to happen here, let me put my epoxy down, is we're going to build this up 1/4 inch at a time. That's the easiest way I know of to do it, and to make sure that it stays straight and strong, we're going to just basically layer and laminate it all the way up using epoxy with just a little bit of thickener. And you should see a string right here. The reason the string is there is to show me coming off the keel line what a straight line is going to look like, right? So basically it just gives me an eyeball point so I know where I'm going to be going to. So, you know, every one of these Whitehalls and Wearies is going to be a little bit different, but they all follow the exact same theory. And here's what's going to happen. I got a piece in here already. It's going to be my first piece, and it will slide right down there to the bottom. And when I pull it up and around here and lay it flat, you're going to see that the string is actually even with the bottom of this piece. The reason for that is ultimately what's going to happen is I'm going to put another layer, another layer, another layer, and they're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller going this way. What's going to happen is we're going to cut this flat going that way, and then we're going to sand that off, and then the next piece of keel is going to be right over the top all the way down, which will seal up all the ends of these and tie them together really nicely. All right, so now the way I'm going to do this is by using the staple gun again, because again it's expeditious and the cameras are rolling here, and it's going to make this job a whole lot quicker for me. If you're doing it, you're probably using screws if you don't have that gun. And the thing you have to be careful of is you have to be mindful of where you're going to be cutting. So what that means for me is you can see the string is right here, and right where the string starts to get higher than the wood, that's the last place that I can put a staple. It's the last place that you're going to be able to put a screw if you're using tiny screws or little tiny nails, right? Because when we go to cut, we don't want to be hitting metal, right? We want to be just hitting wood from one end to the other. So my last staple will be right about here. And then what I've done is I've made this little block here. I got a little tiny brad nail inside of a little piece of cedar, and I'm just going to nail that down. Now what that does is once it's all dry, I can just pop the nail, pull that piece of cedar out, or crack it out, do whatever I need to do to get that off there. And that means that everything above that line is going to be out, no metal there, right? So I can cut right down the slot, cut right down the side there. And that should make it easy. Now, the reason this works is because, again, the pieces are going to get smaller and smaller. The next piece only comes to here, so I can put a block here, and the next one comes here, I can put a block here, so they're not going to get in the way of each other, right? Also, you're going to notice down at the end here, I'm going to overhang a bit, because I can't keep putting a staple in the very, very end of this thing, because that'll make a weak point, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to overhang, I'll put a staple here, and then I'll put one here, and then the next one I can stagger it down here. You don't want to do one staple right on top of the other anywhere along here. So I leave it a little bit long there and we stagger it, okay? All right, so for the epoxy, this is just your basic epoxy mix that we've already been through. And I thickened it just, excuse me, just a little bit with wood flour. And you can see it's still nice and runny. Now we're going to be moving pretty quick here because, you know, I want to be able to show you how this builds up. But when you do this, you're going to paint it on the underside of this and the top side of this. And then it's hardwood, so you give it a few minutes, you know, give it 4 or 5 minutes, let it seep in a little bit, and then go ahead and put it down. You know, just don't paint it on and put it right down, because then you're not giving it enough time to get into the wood at all. Okay, that is pretty much the technique at hand. Let me throw some gloves on, and then we'll start putting some of these strips in place. Okay, so I made sure that I sanded this first and made it a nice clean surface. And again, you know, you don't want it, this is not something where you're going to want a whole lot of squeeze out, but you want to make sure that it's liberally applied and that everything is getting a nice good coating of the epoxy. Now the reason that there's just a tiny bit of thickener in this, the wood flour, is because we're not mating two very, very rough surfaces. In fact, we're mating two surfaces that are fairly finished. So we don't need a lot of filler. We do need good glue contact though, so for the little places that there are grain and it's not, you know, what we didn't do is sand this with 220 grit paper or anything. So for the places that there is wood grain and all that, this little bit of thickener will do the job just fine. All right. So now I've got it on there, covered every little inch of it. And now I'm going to do the same thing on this piece. Now be careful, you know, we have tape, cellophane tape on the inside of this, so it's fairly well protected, but there's still no reason to get sloppy down there, because you certainly don't want your skeg pieces or your dead wood attaching to it. And you want it to be able to come off fairly easy. So nice, neat job all the way down. Now hopefully at this point of the process you've used the epoxy enough so that you're trusting it at this point. Generally speaking, if you do it right, you get your glue joints all lined up right and right kind of epoxy and the right kind of thickener and all that, that joint's going to be stronger than the actual wood itself. I've been doing this for a really, really long time and I've tested it a number of times and it's never let me down. That joint is always rock solid. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever had a joint fail along the epoxy line that was protected from UV. And I know your boat's going to be well protected from UV because if you're doing your boat in bright work, then you're going to have lots and lots of marine varnish on it, and if you're painting it, well, that kind of speaks for itself. If you do leave epoxy exposed to ultraviolet rays for extended periods of time, meaning out in the sun without any protection, it will start to bust up and delaminate on you over time. No doubt about it. Seen it happen a number of times. Okay, so I got epoxy on both sides there. And now it's just a matter of getting it stapled in place. I'm just going to start here with the end. Come up a few inches. Take your time, get it lined up exactly the way you want it. If you do this right, when you're all done, it's going to be nothing but a little light hand sanding to get it all exactly where it needs to be. Okay, looking good. Okay, so that's about as far as I want to go with staples. So now I'm just going to take that little block that we made up, put that in place, and hammer it home. Okay, bring it right down to home because, you know, what I'm going to end up doing is just cracking that block away from there and that nail will come right out. Alright, so I got a little bit of sponge here, so I'll probably end up putting another little nail right there, but not until I put the next piece on. Okay, so as you're going along, reach down in here in my drawer, go ahead and clean up. Yeah, nice. Okay, so I'm assuming at this point you're kind of getting the idea and you see where we're going. And now we just kind of keep on keeping on. So I got a few here that are already cut. I'll do the next one same way I did this one, and you can see that it goes well past that string, right? So I'm just gonna move it down to about here. That's pretty much where this one's gonna go. So you get the idea, we're just building her up. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and plow through the rest of these and get this dead wood done. Well, there you go. That's all there is to it. Goes pretty quick. Now, this is going to be a kind of a tender spot for the boat until we get it finished up. We're going to do a little sanding on each side, very little hopefully. And then we can put 10-ounce glass going up both sides with another 10-ounce joint right down there where it connects to the boat, and that should make it good and strong. But before we do that, we're going to have to cut it. We're going to have to cut it right along here and then right down here. So we're going to leave this on. I'm going to use this to help my my saw cut right down through there, and I can finish that off with some sand, sandpaper, and we're looking good. So I had a little bit of epoxy left over at the end. We still had that little piece to do down there on the keel, so I took care of that. And now I'm just going to get out of here and let everything dry. Make sure before you start messing around down here with the dead wood, you want to give that at least a couple of days to set up. I would even argue that you probably ought to give it, 4 or 5, let it completely set and cure, and make sure it's good and hard before you take a saw to it. This is no time to be messing around with that. So, let it set up, let it get good and hard, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut that down, and then we're going to put the keel right over the top of that and wrap it around the front, and then we'll be ready to basically start doing our filler coats and finishing up the bottom so we can flip this boat, and that's an exciting time. Okay, I got a little bit of cleanup to do here in the shop, and then we're going to leave and let her dry.